Hey guys, Stephanie with AmericanMuscle.com here with my review of the C&L Cold Air Intake available for the 2015 and up V6 Mustang. The C&L Cold Air Intake is going to be for the S550 V6 owners out there who are looking for a closed element cold air intake that also keeps the direct cold air feed that Ford has created from factory. A cold air intake is normally one of the first mods that many Mustang owners go to, but there are many different types of cold air intakes on the market. The C&L right here is an option that brings benefits besides just pure number gains to the table without requiring a tune. Speaking of gains, let's break the numbers down first before getting into the intake. We already ran a baseline run and got some numbers in the books, so we're going to run the car again with the C&L installed. Now we did pair a 93 octane Bamba performance tune with the intake, even though the intake does not require a tune, but we wanted to see the full power potential that the intake has. A cold air intake by itself will only net a few horsepower at the end of the day, and we're talking single digits here, so even if an aftermarket intake does not necessarily require a tune, we always recommend a tune if you're looking for any gains or improvements from your Mustang. Our baseline run with our 2015 V6 gave us numbers of 241 horsepower and 235 foot-pounds of torque at the rear wheels. With the C&L intake and the 93 octane Bamba performance tune, the car made 260 horsepower and 250 foot-pounds of torque, making for a peak gain of 19 horsepower and 15 foot-pounds of torque. Now keep in mind that we did pair the intake with a tune, so a lot of these gains can definitely be attributed to that tune. Peak gains are always nice to know, but the real thing I look for is differences throughout the curve or in your driving RPMs, which is where you're actually going to notice performance gains when you're driving. And throughout the curve, we're seeing gains of 22 horsepower in the 6100 RPM range and 22 foot-pounds of torque right in the 3600 RPM range. Having this low-end torque gain is something that you're actually going to feel as you're going through the gears. You'll get up to speed faster and you'll go through the gears a lot faster too. So overall, what we've seen from this intake on the dyno here is some of the lowest intake air temps out of the aftermarket cold air intakes for the V6, and that can be attributed to the sealed air box, which I'll talk about in a minute. We've also seen that it really makes power up top where the factory air intake system and filter become restrictive. Like I said before, you're only going to see gains of 2 to 3 horsepower without a tune, but just keep in mind that the more you mod your car, the more restrictive the factory air intake will become. Now, like I just said, also keep in mind that a lot of the gains that we're seeing are due to the tune that we paired with the intake. If we take a closer look at the C&L itself, it's first off a popular intake on the site and one that's going to come in at the top of the line in regards to price at right around $400, but also in quality and fitment as well. This intake has one of the best fit and finishes that I've seen for the S550 V6, and all of C&L's products are built and tested in the USA, which is just something that I like to point out. But looking at the specifics here, this does include a reusable filter that you can easily wash and re-oil when it gets a little dirty, and it's a pretty good sized air filter too. I would definitely say that the air filter is on the bigger side of the filters, and the intake piping is also larger than piping that I've seen for aftermarket S550 cold air intakes. The intake also has a roto-molded plastic construction throughout, including the intake tube, which will give smooth air delivery to the engine. One of the big things that I wanted to point out with this intake though is the housing here. First of all, it's enclosed, which you're only going to see from the other option of aerate right now. It has a plexiglass lid that's removable, so you can get to the filter easily or see it without having to take the airbox apart. The enclosed airbox is going to protect the filter from elements within the engine compartment, as well as help keep warm air from inside the compartment from being used by the engine. And like I mentioned before, this technique works. We saw some of the lowest intake air temps on the dyno with this intake. This leads me to the other cool thing about the housing, and that's that it taps into the factory cold air duct, which brings cool air in from the grill instead of using warm engine compartment air. This is a really nice feature in my opinion, and it gives this intake a benefit that you don't see from many other aftermarket intakes for the S550 V6s. And like I mentioned earlier, this particular intake does not require a tune, which means that you can just bolt it on and go if you want to. But if you're looking for gains and improvements in drivability, then just know that any improvements that you'll see from the intake can be greatly amplified by running a tune, just as a side note. When it comes to price, this is an intake that's at the top of the line when it comes to both fit and finish and design. It provides good power gains when paired with a tune, it's an enclosed airbox style, and it utilizes the cold air feed from outside of the car. With all of this being said, this intake is one of the most expensive that's available, and it costs between $350 and $400. As for the install, it's nothing too difficult, and the intake will come with all of the items that you'll need, including clamps, couplers, and hardware. All that you really need to complete the install is a 10mm, a flathead for the plastic pins, and some pliers to remove the hose clamps. This is probably one of the easier mods that you can tackle with your new Mustang, and it'll probably take about a half hour to an hour tops, and I'm going to call it a 1 out of 3 wrenches on our scale. At the start of the install, disconnect the breather hoses from the inlet tube. Remove the 10mm bolt on the airbox that holds it to the inner fender, and detach the airbox from the lower inlet tube on the side of the rad as you take out the airbox. Loosen the clamps on the inlet tube at the throttle body and the airbox, and then remove the inlet tube. Then you're going to want to ready your new airbox by installing the filter adapter. Next, install the aluminum fittings for the air hoses into the intake tube. Then you're ready to install the airbox into the car, starting with the air duct sliding into the factory location, and reinstall the factory bolt to hold it down. Once the airbox is in and bolted down, slide the coupler onto the adapter on the airbox. Then slide the other coupler onto the throttle body. Just make sure that you can get to all of the clamps to tighten them down, but leave everything loose for now. Install the inlet tube onto the coupler on the throttle body and then onto the air filter coupler. Tighten down the clamps so everything is tight, and connect the vacuum hoses to the inlet tube. All that's left then is just the filter itself, which just drops in, and tighten up the clamp, and then install the airbox and tighten it down. Wrapping things up here, I think the C&L intake is a well-built intake that works with an enclosed airbox and taps into the cold air duct that Ford has provided for the intake. It fits well and has a decent-sized reusable filter and does not require a tune. You can check this intake out more online for yourself, and for all things Mustang, keep it right here at AmericanMuscle.com.